FPL Game Week 22 transfer targets. Finally, it is time to go back to thinking about our FPL teams after the most boring month from Premier League FPL point of view I think I can remember. Today we're going to go through some defenders, midfielders and forwards that I think you should be considering buying into your team this week. We'll talk about some of the upcoming blank game weeks, double game weeks, all of that sort of stuff. A few injuries as well. So today it is my Game Week 22 transfer targets. What is up everyone, FPL Harry here. Before we dive into the video, 1,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you are new around here as well. Finally, we are back talking FPL. It has been a while. I didn't want to upload last week just because if I spoke to you last week about FPL, I would have said if, but wait for the FA Cup so many times in the video, it would have been completely useless. So I appreciate your patience, but we are back in the swing of it. There'll be a video every single day for you this week and going forward as well. You'll be sick and tired of me. It shows that I've been rusty. This is the second time I've had to do this video because the first time I didn't click record and that was a 15-20 minute video that went down the drain. But anyway, we are back. It is transfer targets time. We aren't necessarily going to talk about players to avoid, but there are a few players that I think I just need to discuss because they're not in my players to buy, but they are definitely going to be some of the top thought about players this week, top discussed players. So we're going to start off at Manchester City. Of course, Manchester City have now had their double in Game Week 25 confirmed. Chelsea at home, Brentford at home. They've also got that fixture in Game Week 26 as well in the blank that is now for Spurs, Chelsea, Liverpool and Luton. They have Bournemouth away that week. So they are some of the most sought after assets in the game. First up is Erling Haaland. He didn't feature for Manchester City in the Cup at all. It doesn't sound like he's necessarily going to be available to start at home to Burnley, in my opinion, from what we've heard from Pep Guardiola yet. So in my team, I'm not going to be buying Erling Haaland unless I get concrete news that he's definitely going to start, which I don't think we're going to get. I think he'll be on the bench against Burnley and he might be available to start against Brentford. Pep has confirmed, as much as he refused it earlier on in the season, actually just before Christmas, he said it wasn't a fracture. He's now said it was a fracture, so they do need to be cautious with him. The other one is Kevin De Bruyne. Now, Kevin De Bruyne has already had over 1 million transfers in, and that's about 10% of you minimum watching this have already bought Kevin De Bruyne into your team, and I imagine at least 10% more of you are considering buying him, if not 50% more of you. He's definitely one of the most talked about players this week. The fixtures are there. However, Pep has said again, he's ready to start, but I do need to manage him. I do need to be cautious with his minutes. Whether he starts sooner or later, we'll have to see. 10.6 million for a player that isn't guaranteed to start games is a little bit of a concern. Maybe he starts Burnley, but then is he going to start Brentford? If he starts Burnley and Brentford, well, is he then going to start Everton, which is just before their Champions League game between Game Week 24 and 25? If he starts that, is he going to start both in the double and then start Game Week 26 as well? Now, I pick players that I know are going to start, and I don't tend to pick minutes risk players. However, De Bruyne has 6 games between Game Week 22 and 26 inclusive. If you're happy that De Bruyne starts 4 or 3 of those and he gets sub appearances in the others, then go for it. We saw him do damage off the bench against Newcastle. He's not going to do that every week, but he is capable of it. However, if you're a bit worried about minutes, I do think the worries are justified, and I do think he starts a maximum of 4 out of 6 games between now and Game Week 26. So there has to be doubt in our minds about the amount of minutes he's going to play. It just depends on whether you want to take that risk, because the minutes he does play are great and he is fantastic. Next up is Liverpool. We do expect Trent to be back for Chelsea at home in Game Week 22, so there's not really too much to talk about there. However, if you sold Trent or you don't own Trent, Chelsea and Arsenal in the next 2 are maybe not the direct weeks to go and buy him. There is another defender in this list. It's probably obvious who it is that I prefer to buy over Trent this week. And the other one is Jota. Jota is one of the most spoken about and bought players this week because when he starts for Liverpool, he is fantastic. The next couple are not great in terms of fixtures, but he has a great record of scoring, particularly at home, which is against Chelsea, and against Arsenal as well. Game Week 24, Burnley at home, and Game Week 25, currently just Brentford, but of course that is where the double is predicted to go for the Luton game, which is currently being postponed from Game Week 26, which is a blank. That is the other complication for the Liverpool asset, is the blank that they are having in Game Week 26. So, do I think Jota is a good pick? Yes. But my other concern with him, apart from the blank, is Salah coming back. Between now and Salah coming back, I think Jota will start pretty much every game. He looks so good and he is so clinical. But when Salah comes back, Salah is pretty nailed. I think it's safe to say that. And Darwin feels pretty nailed as well. That leaves Gakpo, who I don't think is going to get many starts, but he might get the odd one here or there, maybe before a cup final or something like that. Diaz and Jota for one position on the pitch. And if Salah's going to be back by game week 25, which is about when he's expected to be back, you could go into the double not knowing how many minutes Jota's going to play. Now, he could start one and be on the bench for the other, which is probably the most likely scenario, and that might be fine for you. But buying a player who's going to play once in a double and then have a blank has to be considered. So I don't think Jota is a bad pick at all. If we get more update on when Salah's going to be out for, how long he's meant to be out for, and it's pushed back a little bit, and he's only maybe going to play one maximum in game week 25, then Jota is a fantastic pick. But just consider what it does to your game week 25 team if he's not certain to start both, and game week 26 if you have lots of Palmer, if you've got Porro, if you've got other Liverpool assets in there like Trent. Adding more double game week 25 players at the expense of game week 26 just needs to be considered. Now, another one with the blank in 26, but I do really like, and I'm considering buying into my team this week, is Richarlison. He's up to 7 million. He is playing up front for Spurs. Maddison's back. Son could be back by game week 23 if South Korea do lose their Asia Cup game against Saudi Arabia, which is just before the game week 22 deadline, which is expected to be a very, very close game. Richarlison does look like a fantastic option. The underlying data is so good. 0.7 expected goal involvements per 90 is some of the best at his price. He's actually top 4 midfielders for XG per 90 over the past few weeks. So the data is really, really strong. The fixtures are great. He's also guaranteed to play in game week 29, which is the big blank game week of the season. We will have a double game week, blank game week chip strategy video coming for you next week. So bear in mind, subscribe to get a reminder of that, of course. The only thing, of course, is the blank in game week 26. So if you've got Porro, if you've got Palmer, if you've got Trent, if you've got another Liverpool, for example, you've got a cheap player on your bench who doesn't play, then maybe adding Richarlison there isn't a great idea. But for me, I don't have many blank players at the moment, and given how good Richarlison is before the blank and how good the Spurs fixtures are after the blank, he should definitely be worth considering for your teams this week. Next up is the best defender to buy this week, and that is Estupinan. It's no surprise that he's probably in there, but if you're looking for a defender and you don't own him, for me, he is the best buy. Brighton, they were poor defensively, but I did say it, that they were pretty good defensively in the Europa League, and the fixtures coming up for them were good, so the defensive returns should be there, and we've seen the attacking returns also be there in some of the games as well. I really like him. The fixtures are great. Luton and Palace in the next two. Spurs away in 24s, not fantastic, but after that, the fixtures remain really, really good all the way up until game week 28 for Brighton. He's also playing left centre-back, which some people have used as a narrative to say he's not good, but he is still getting forward sometimes. He's taking some corners, and playing at centre-back means he completes more passes and he loses the ball less, which is fantastic for bonus points, as we saw in game week 21. So 5 attacking returns so far this season, over 5.5 points per 90 as well. The defensive data is still pretty good. They're in the top half this season. The attacking threat, the fixtures, the defensive ability as well just means there shouldn't be another defender you should be buying over Estupinan this week. Now, we spoke about Kevin De Bruyne being a bit of an issue about minutes, but for me, Phil Foden is still the best Manchester City midfielder to go and buy. Now, yes, De Bruyne might start, and when they both start, maybe he's a better asset, but Foden, for me, feels more nailed. Yes, the blank against Newcastle with Kevin De Bruyne scoring 12 points will give a lot of people recency bias that De Bruyne is a better pick. But Foden feels much more nailed. He's also 2.5 million cheaper than De Bruyne is. Now, right now, that might not feel like a big factor. But as soon as Haaland is back, as soon as Salah is back, as soon as Son is back, that 2.5 million will go a long way. So for me, Foden is a better pick than De Bruyne. The fixtures are there, as you spoke about with De Bruyne. Guaranteed, of course, the double in 25. They're guaranteed to play in the blank in game week 26 as well. So if you don't have Foden, you're looking for a Manchester City midfielder, I would still buy Foden over Kevin De Bruyne. Another midfield option that we've got is a bit of a differential, and that is returning early from the African Cup of Nations with Ghana being knocked out, and that is Kudus. A lot of people looked at Bowen over the past few weeks and thought he's lacked a bit of a teammate to play with, and I think Kudus could be that. And as I spoke about with Foden, having a little bit of money spare means I would probably be buying Kudus now over buying Jarrod Bowen. Now, Kudus is a very eye test versus data type of pick. The data this season has not been great. 0.3 expected goal involvements per 90, which isn't fantastic. But if you watch him, the way he finishes, how involved he is really, really good. He shoots well, he shoots early, he's very clinical, and he's looked great. He's done the same when he went away to the African Cup of Nations as well. The upcoming fixtures are pretty good. Game week 23, 24 are not amazing, but a lot of us have benching headaches that week anyway. So if you have a benching headache, you could bench Kudus, but if you had to start him, that's no problem either. The fixtures are really good. Bowen, of course, is there. Kudus is back, and Paqueta is not far away either. And we could see West Ham back and firing, and at 6.8 million could be a great pick. And then finally we go up front, and it is Ivan Toney. Of course, came back from his ban, scored 8 points. 5 goals in that game. He scored once and got a yellow card and still picked up 3 bonus points. Highlights what Ivan Toney is as an FPL pick. The underlying data for that game was okay, but it's a very small sample size. Now, some of you will say, but Harry, the fixtures, Spurs, Manchester City, plus the double of Liverpool, Manchester City as well, is not great. However, if I told you he got 1 return in the double in game week 25, you'd probably say, that seems about right. 1 return. If Brentford are going to do anything, he's likely to be involved. He is on penalties. He is on direct free kicks. He is the focal point of every single Brentford attack. He is likely to get something, I feel like, in that double. He's also guaranteed to play in game week 26 in the blank. He's also already guaranteed to play in the blank in game week 29 as well. So he feels like a nice long-term pick. And outside of Erling Haaland, he is the number 1 forward I am considering buying into my team over the next few weeks. And outside of that, there are a few differentials that are worth talking about. The first up is Eze. So Sheffield United this week, yes, they've looked pretty poor Palace, but Edouard is back. We don't have an update on Elise, so Eze should be on penalties and most set pieces as well. He's very involved, and finally the fixtures for them are turning at the moment. And I do think at 6 million, he could be a really good differential. The other one is Bernardo Silva. A lot of us have looked at Foden, De Bruyne. Some of us don't have the money to go to these assets, and Bernardo Silva at 6.5 million could be a really nice pick. Of course, rotation might be a little bit more. His role in the team might not be there. But over the past few years, Bernardo Silva is a player that never gets enough FPL focus. He just ticks along really, really nicely, and no one ever buys him. But he's always there for Manchester City. He's a class player, and he gets returns. And the final one is Jimenez. Now, great fixtures on the short term. Fulham are better at home, and they play 3 of the next 4 at home. Guaranteed to play in 26 and already guaranteed to play in game week 29. So if you're looking for a cheap forward, you might be going to someone like João Pedro. But if you have a front 8, going to João Pedro is more likely to cause you a benching headache than do anything good for your team. Yes, he's more likely for returns than maybe Jimenez is. But when game week 29 comes around, Brighton play Manchester City. So that game feels like it's almost guaranteed to be a blank. So Jimenez with a guaranteed fixture that week at home to Spurs could just be a nice option to sit on your bench. Plus, the fixtures over the short term are really good for them. So the first video of many over the next week. Of course, we have a deadline on Tuesday and a deadline on Saturday. Top transfer targets. We've had a key talk about some of the Manchester City and Liverpool assets. We'll be back tomorrow talking about my team and what transfers I plan on making as well. So make sure you have subscribed below to get a reminder when that video does go live. Drop any questions you have about your team in the comment section down below as well. It has been a while, so I'm sure you've all been tinkering with your FPL teams as well. Thank you all so much for watching. Like the video before you go, and I'll be back again very soon.